Hello, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Reggie Turner and Terrence Moore. The FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. We are honored tonight to have with us as our guest Robert Bo Myers. Bo, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Our segment tonight actually is the start of a new series for the show. It's called The Influencers. And what we're going to do is we're going to feature people that have created a lot of buzz around the county, that have been very successful in their careers and their businesses, and is successful in inspiring people. And Bo, you were at the top of my list when I was looking for those type of people to bring onto the show. Talk to us about who you are. For those of our, I bet a lot of our audience is familiar with this, but for those who aren't, tell us about you.
Well, I'm a transplant from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Came down to Shepherd in 1967, and that was during the Vietnam conflict, and so I was drafted, and they put me in the Marine Corps officer program. After the completion of that, obviously I have my tour of duty, and came back to teach at Williamsport High School. Everything took off after that.
Excellent. Rich?
So what are your earliest memories of when you came to this community? Like what things still stand out in your memory when you first came here? Because obviously this is a little bit of a culture shock from Philadelphia.
Yeah, sure was. Really, coming into Shepherdstown, I think, was the most difficult thing because of the racial barriers at that time. And I had not been experiencing that at all. My community was very mixed, and when I went into Shepherdstown, there was a black side on both sides of the town. Mm-hmm. So that was a difficult thing for me because I just had not ever experienced that. Of course, things changed after I got out of the Marine Corps, and then I came back, and that's when I really started to live in the Hagerstown area proper. Coming out of Vietnam was a difficult thing, yeah. And it was a culture shock for us as well as everybody else, because I was during that difficult period in '68, very desiring to serve our country, but not all of my friends agreed with that. So that was a little bit difficult. But after a year or two, and I had not seen combat, but after a year or two, it didn't matter if you were or you didn't. You served in our uniform. I assimilated very nicely and have just had a wonderful experience in this community ever since.
Well, this is one of those communities that you may not plan to stay, but it seems to pull you in, and then the years just start to go by.
Yeah, they do. And there were just so many opportunities for me to stay in this area. I never really had to leave.
So
excellent.
What pulled you into education, from serving the country to serving the community through education?
Well, I had been a teacher, that was my degree, English and physical education. I've always wanted to serve other people. I had one experience when I was a young kid. I guess I was probably in the 10th or 11th grade. And I just wanted to do something different. Living just outside of Philadelphia, I would, in the summer, I wound up as a volunteer working with young children at 36th and Bering, if you know Philadelphia, that's down in Mantua Village, and I was the only white guy that was there. Loved every minute of it, and it was cut short that summer because my grandfather died, but I remember clearly, and I was only a 13-year-old kid, of having to tell those kids that I had to leave, and it just made an impression on me. There were tears, there were all of those things. And I've just always liked to help other people.
Wow.
How did your military experience, the one thing that I admire about you, and we interact every couple of years at this point, but I follow your posts on Facebook, and the one thing I admire about you is the fact that it's all about leadership for you. It's all about inspiring people, those that you've taught, those that you've coached, those that might friend you on Facebooks. How did your military experience shape your approach to leadership, shape your approach to life?
Here's a secret few know, and that is that I actually went to a military school up above Carlisle. My youth was not the most sterling, and my parents found that that might be a good environment for me, and I immediately gravitated to it. I was very successful in high school. In fact, it gave me the discipline and the boundaries that I needed at that time. I think in the military, you have to be very focused. You have to be willing to learn and then lead. There are just so many things about it, and there's a purpose. Those of us who were in the service or serving now, it's more than money, and we didn't make any money back in the day. Now they're making decent money. But it was just the pride of the country. And for me, helping others succeed and get focused has really been the center of my life.
You just hit on something like a jewel, and I'm telling you right now, I'm using it, right? To learn and then lead, when so many want to lead and learn at the same time, or lead and never learn.
And never learn.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Talk to me about the shift that you see now in leadership, in that capacity.
What we're doing now, it seems to me, remember this is a 75-year-old guy talking to you, and I do want to mention this, that I think that we are losing the strength and the leadership of those of us who are older. I'd love to go ahead and continue to work until the day that I die. Yeah. I have to have something that's going to challenge me. But everything that I've done started at the bottom, and then you worked your way up. I've never had a desire to be a particular thing. I've always wanted to serve, and from that came opportunities. In fact, I left the Marine Corps as a captain, and as I look back, I probably could have stayed for 20 years, but I needed another challenge at that time because the war was over. And in '74, they were getting rid of officers because we didn't need them anymore. But I've always wanted to serve, and I've always felt like if I could make people a little bit better, not with my hands, but with my thoughts and with my prodding, that they could be better people too.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find out what I'm going to be when I grow up.
And me too. You're okay. You're okay. Yeah, you're okay.
We know what Cronkite's going to be, right?
I've already become it. With your various experiences, tell me about the lessons that you've learned in regards to team building and those type of things. Because obviously involved in athletics, you have a lot of folks that are of different skill sets, but you need everyone to coalesce to become a team.
Absolutely.
So share a little bit in regards to kind of those team building lessons that you think.
I played 3 sports in college. I wasn't tremendous or anything, but I played 3 sports in college. And then I became a runner. I was heavily involved in running. And after my experience at Williamsport, we played football. I was a coach. In college, I was a guy that would stay after practice for an hour to see if I could find anybody who would go ahead and run patterns. But I've always been that digger. And I think in my track programs at HCC, it was HJC at the time.
Yes.
But with my teams, I would take anybody. And actually at Williamsport High School, I'd have 80 kids in an indoor track program. As long as you were willing to work, then I'd be willing to have you. And to this day, I talk to some of my former athletes, and I can't even remember what they ran, but they can remember what we did together.
Right.
And I think that was the most important thing for me. But I think building a team, my experiences as an educator, that comes into play a little bit more because you're very focused in track and field or football or basketball, whatever it might be. But when you're trying to build a team to be able to build a school and build a culture, that's where it becomes extremely important. And we can have that discussion if you want to continue.
Well, in today's sports world, things are a lot different, right, from what you grew up with, where a lot of things are centralized around travel sports. And travel sports are competitive where, from some instances, you're stacking teams, so you really never build the cohesion of being a team. Sometimes it's just a money grab. And those type of things. Like, how do you see the environment that's different today than your experiences?
Well, I think parents are very much more involved than ever. I think in our society now, and we've gone through, 5 generations since I grew up, we've become more comfortable. And so with that comfort, there aren't real great challenges. We create things. Everybody's got enough money, not everyone, of course, but to live a relatively comfortable life,
right,
considering the rest of the world. Okay, we're like millionaires, right? Okay, concerning other countries. But I think now there's so many people who live through the other person, and so that might be the child. Okay, this isn't your game. This is their game. Observe, support, do those things. I was recently at a football or basketball game in the county, and one team was totally superior to the other team. And the total lack of sportsmanship in that particular situation, where the other team's being beaten, they're certainly doing as much as they can do,
right,
and the other team is mocking them and that kind of thing. So on the reverse side, high school sports are trying to build a team. Travel teams, as I look at it, is in many cases they're playing far too many games than
Yes.
practicing.
Yes.
And when I'm one of my friends is a junior high basketball coach. They played 40 games already with 7th graders, and I'm sitting there going, my gosh. They're never really learning the skills
Right.
and perfecting those skills. So that's a big issue right now. And I think that what it is I had my day. We've all had our day. Let your kid have their day. And you're not going to affect it anyway. You're just going to go ahead and provide a poor example probably to others. And I just think, we're either going to have high school sports, but it's dropping because of that. The skill levels and whatever. So I don't know. I think that we're more in a situation where we're pushing our kids towards something that we want.
And it sounds like it's more of a filter for talent versus the lessons that was once learned in sports. I think youth sports is a great venue and avenue to teach the lessons around teamwork, around camaraderie, around service, around support. And if you're playing all those games, you can't even learn the skill set. So those who have the opportunity to ultimately develop and be good don't get as much of that opportunity. But those who are playing not just because they hope someday to be, in the NBA or NFL or any other major sport, but the life lessons that are missed in those sports. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, oftentimes those kids just meet whoever the coach is at the venue, right, and they get on the court because, there's 5 other teams that are going to play. So that personalization that you get probably isn't there. If you're recruiting, you've got kids from Spring Mills to Hagerstown or whatever on a team. They never see each other except when they're competing on the weekends.
See, my coach was an extension of my parents, right? My parents were working, and if my parents couldn't be there, my coach was my disciplinarian. Mm-hmm. My coach was the one that got me home at night to make sure I was fed. Or if I had issues where I couldn't go to my parents, possibly an opportunity to go to the coach who would actually be support.
Sure.
And those were lifelong relationships. How many of your students or your athletes are you still in contact with?
That's an interesting point. Just on Facebook, a team that I had in 1981, one of the athletes had posted, and so that got filtered out today, and I've had already multiple responses back to what I had said. But I think with my team, we didn't just have 12 or whatever we would have. At HCC, we would have as many as 50 kids in the program, and men and women. And I have contact with those kids. One of my shot put discus girls, Julie Sanders, owns Sanders Market up in Cascade. You know, I see her every week when I'm getting dog bones for my guys. You know, so yeah, I mean those relationships are still there, not as close, okay, and sometimes they come out of the woodwork, so to speak. But there's an awful lot of them.
You know, you said something that really caught my attention, and I just want to make sure I heard this correctly. Did you say that you had 80 kids for indoor track?
Yeah, and actually at Hancock, when I went up there, I was up there for 3 years. There was an article that Doug Dull, who Jim will remember here, and went on to be an athletic director all over the country. But he was a wonderful newspaper person. He did an article. They used to have a Saturday sports section, 12 pages and that kind of thing. And they did an article on the 50% of the kids at Hancock Middle Senior High School, at the high school level, were on the indoor track team.
That is absolutely
amazing. Now keep
amazing.
in mind, okay, that Hancock's just a little school, but
right.
Yeah. And for me, it's always been trying to provide an opportunity, and I always felt track was the best place to go, that there's so many different skill sets that you have, that any kid that wants to be involved and work, can certainly get better, and then have lifelong relationships. And I think that's what I was looking for.
It's so much different today. I mean, my daughter participated this year in indoor track, and if schools were having 80 kids out, like you would need a totally different venue, because it would just be so many kids. And HCC is packed, every week anyway because of track. But there is no school, not even Frederick County schools are coming out with 80 kids. And I think that mentality of if you're going to work, you can come. And I just think that in today's time, you're missing out on cultivating so many leaders. Not athletes, but leaders, the leadership qualities that you learn. And there's probably a lot of diamonds in the rough that are not being identified because they're never getting the opportunity.
And that's the point. That's the point. How many kids have something to say, but they're too nervous to go to the board to say it? And when you create an environment that you described where everyone is welcome, it's not about your level of ability to perform at this point. It's about your willingness to do the work.
Right.
And how many, as you said, diamonds in the rough did you cultivate, and others in that era, because everyone's invited?
Well, that's the way that you build teams. That's the way you build a country too.
Absolutely.
Going back to what we discussed earlier in terms of you doing it and then you learn to be a leader, that's totally different now. It's totally different. People are going into leadership positions and they have no idea what they're doing. And it just, you don't become a leader overnight.
No.
And you've got to be uncomfortable. You've got to be willing to go into uncomfortable situations with the idea that you're going to do the very best that you can do. And as I told Jim earlier, one of my favorite things was to go into a challenging position because if it wasn't being done before and you can't get it done, then it's kind of a wash. But if you can make one difference, then you've been successful.
I also love that you're speaking about leadership with action. Not once did you say, and I'm a leader. Right. And I think often people assume the title of leadership and not the actions that require you to be a leader. Right. Share probably when did you know that you were a leader, that you were in that position, and not just that you wanted to do it through your actions and your service, but you kind of realized that people were truly looking to you in a different space?
I was fortunate in growing up. I was in, baseball, football, and I was a quarterback and I was a catcher, and so those are kind of leadership positions. So I was learning at that point. but I learned to be a leader in the Marine Corps. It's that simple. You know, people don't realize the number of people who will go into OCS or Officer Candidate School and the number that will come out. So I want to share that piece with you. When I went in 1968 down to Quantico, Virginia, for the first summer of two before I was commissioned, there were 937 young men in 1968 in the summer. You have to go back another summer. When we graduated, there were 137. 90% of those kids didn't follow through. Some washed out. Some, at that time, if you were a college student, you had a deferment. I was the only one because I had been drafted. I was stuck in the Marine Corps whether I liked it or not, and I wanted to be a Marine, so I was in a happy place. But you know, those guys wanted to be leaders. We became leaders, the 137. And then we continued our training for another 5 months at Quantico, just learning to be a Marine officer, learning something about everything that goes on, whether it's artillery, infantry, communications. And I had to follow the people who knew what the heck they were doing. And I learned that a good leader will listen, a good leader will always, I shouldn't say always, there are critical situations where there may be chaos, where literally you have to come in and you have to sweep the deck, but not very often. But many people will go into any situation and clear the deck because it's mine now. That deck is ours, and we're building a boat, whatever it might be. And I could never do what I was doing without my non-commissioned officers, you know, my master sergeants, whoever. And I learned that very quickly. And that's, I was reviewing for our talk tonight, and that's one of the things that is most important, is that a good leader will listen before he speaks or she speaks. And I think that that's important. I think the other thing is you've got to do research to find out what it is that you're walking into. And many people will go in for a job interview, whatever it might be, and they want that position without even knowing what it is that they're going to. There's an interview for principals, let's say, and so a person comes in, they don't even know what school they're going to because they haven't been assigned.
It's the title that they're after.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, what is it that you want to do with your life? Okay, we've got one life, you know, we all know that. I'm closer to the end than the beginning with you guys, and that's fine because I'm comfortable with it. But what is it you want to do? Is it make a lot of money? I mean, what are you going to do with it? Can you change lives? Can you help people? And I don't know that I ever went in, I want to change your life. That wasn't it at all. It was, I want to see what you can do, and if you'll be focused enough to meet the objective that we've got.
Going back to our talk in regards to sports and things of that nature, it would seem to me that it's a very challenging environment for coaches and athletic directors and things of that nature, because it seems today's parents do not want their kids coached hard. And there's a lot of trying to bailing their kids out as opposed to letting them fail, allowing them to be coached hard. Sydney's track coach came and talked to me, and I don't interact with her coaches much. I give the space and room, but he was just asking me, like, you know, she has a lot in her. She needs to get it out. I was like, coach her hard. Like, you're never going to hear anything from me. If there's something, if she needs to be picked up when she comes home, I'll do that. But coach her hard. Like, she can take it. But I've also seen parents that want to interject themselves into the process, and it really hurts their kids. And I've seen it dampen the kids' enthusiasm and then walk away from the sports altogether. The question I have is, what advice would you give to coaches today in that environment?
Well, I think one of the problems is that very few people want to go into coaching now.
Right.
And if they do go into coaching, they don't stay very long. Okay. In my day, if you were a physical educator, you coached your entire career.
Right.
That's what you did. But now there's a lot of that coaching turnover, and part of it is you just you mentioned the problem, and that is I've lived my life. I want my child to do as well as they can do.
Right.
My daughter's a wonderful dramatist. She's a thespian. You know, she's now a teacher, but and she ran, and I'm sure she ran because she knew her dad ran. And I never forced her or anything else, and she's developed her own life. And I think too many times, as we've mentioned, you know, parents want to live through their child, and what they value is what does the child's value become later on.
Right.
And I think that's a twisted, backward way to look at parenting. And I think, you know, the coaches need to make sure that they set their boundaries. They're certainly personable, but they're firm. And no parent should ever come to a coach during a contest or whatever. I mean, just tell them to go ahead, call me on Monday morning and leave, and call the administrator and get them out of the building. And I've seen that multiple times. It's not fair to the kid. The kid's embarrassed, and as you said, that youngster will probably go to something else that, you know, makes them feel more comfortable than that. That's not what we should be doing.
Yeah. You know, our county is a hotbed for club volleyball,
Yes.
right? I mean, if pretty much in the state of Maryland, like Washington
Yes.
County is known as the hotbed.
Yes.
And I've been involved, you know, for the past 5-6 years with my daughters, but I've seen like bad behavior traveling. Like, not only are you spending all this money traveling all over the country with your daughters, but then bad behavior among parents, like really
Violence.
dampens the experience. And not only is it lessening our coaches, it's also lessening the officials that want to
Absolutely.
deal with these type of things. Like, it is really causing havoc and chaos in our athletic programs.
There's no question. I officiated track and field. I was a state track and field referee for almost 30 years. I had situations that were international in nature, and you know, coaches and parents questioning what the rules are, and they're right there.
Right.
And in basketball, every play is a judgment call, you know, and so relax a little bit. Yeah, the dude, you know. So with officials, they've had enough.
Yes.
You know, they've had enough. I see the same guys, and these are the guys that, you know, when I was at Williamsport, you know, some of them are still officiating, can hardly get up and down the court. They're trying to provide a service, but nobody wants to go into it, and that's caused by that type of behavior. My solution to all of that is, if you see that, what we're going to do is play that game on Saturday with no fans. And I
Right.
think if we would take that kind of a drastic step, it would you know, bring some people to fore. But we can't let it go. And I think we've become such a society where the boundaries aren't clear. Now they're clear, they're there. You signed that parent contract for your child, and you're not supposed to talk to your coach. Nobody, you know, so they violate it, and nobody's willing to go ahead and handle that. You know, as a leader, I'm going to make that decision, okay? If my decision to, you know, terminate the student's behavior, whatever it is, or the parent, give them a trespass letter. I've never had any problem doing that. But I think as I go through my career, there were fewer and fewer and fewer people in leadership positions who are willing to do that. And I think that's part of what our problem is. Kids need boundaries. They need to know that you need to come to practice on time.
Right.
My 80 kids, if 5 of them aren't going to come to practice, they need to go someplace else. There's plenty of other things you can do, but you're not going to get my time. But I think parents, administrators, if you have a law, follow the law. It's that simple. And I think that's what's happening. And students, children need their boundaries, and they don't need to feel happy all the time.
Right.
They don't. And
I
so,
will give you a round of applause, but the mic be hot.
but I think that's something that we are losing, okay? In an attempt to satisfy everybody, old Lincoln said the right thing. You know, you're satisfying very few, and that's not what we're about. You know?
So you said several things in the barrage of questions that my co-host sent you. You talked about pluralism. You talked about the fact that we need to be able to listen and potentially accept more than one point of view. We don't. Nobody knows everything. you talked about leadership and learning before you lead. And there's a quote that I love that goes something like, leaders speak when they have something to say, fools speak, or fools have to say something, right? And you also talked very early in the conversation, Reggie asked you a question about team building, and you immediately turned that into culture. And I want to explore that more. I want to explore the leadership. I want to explore the pluralism. I want to do that after the break. Stay with us. We'll be back with Bo Myers here on the Flip Side. Welcome back. Once again, we're here with Bo Myers. Bo, again, we're happy to have you here. One of the questions that you answered very early on in the initial conversation, in the initial segment, was about team building, but you parlayed that into a conversation about culture. Talk to me about your definition of the difference and how they interact.
Well, I think in any organization that you're going to be in, and again, whether that's a school, whether it's coaching a team, whether it's in a business, there has to be some overriding connection for all the people who are in that organization. What is your mission statement? And I think that's extremely important and always has been for me, is to have a plan and to execute that plan. When people are looking for leadership, they're looking for somebody to give the guidance for what the organization is going to accomplish. And you can't do that unless everybody in the organization, from the person who is cleaning the bathrooms to the one who is cooking the meal to the secretary, they all have to have value. Too many times people go to work, there is not any connection, they do a job and that's it, and then they go home. Not that your job should be your world, but your job should be something that you are doing because there's a greater good to what you're doing. If we don't have the garbage taken out, then we've got a problem. If we don't have the toilets fixed, we've got a problem. If my secretary isn't feeling a part of what we're doing, then we're not going to have a good, efficient organization. So I think that you always have to have some sort of a theme. And that theme might be, when I was athletic director at Hagerstown Community College, we were going to be a national program with class. Although that was laughed at initially, guess what? Okay, it became a national program with class. When I was at North Hagerstown High School, I remember Dr. Betty Morgan telling me one time in conference, and in confidence, I want that to be the flagship school of Washington County. Well, if that's what the boss wanted, guess what? I got a big sign, had Tim Fraker, the local sign maker, and he put it on the side of North Hagerstown High School. It had 3 ships on it, like the Santa Maria and the Pinto, and it said the flagship school of Washington County. People thought I was crazy, but it was up there for about a dozen years. And I think you have to have something that's going to motivate people. And so in those cases, people were looking for some sort of cohesiveness. And so when you can get a theme and people are working towards that, then you do begin to build the culture. And you have to recognize people. And I'm not talking about getting a driving space for being the teacher of the month. Those are kind of ludicrous because everybody's going to vote for somebody that gets it all the time. But daily, be interacting with people. I was never in my office. Just wasn't. I was in classrooms. I wanted the kids to see me. I wanted my teachers to see me, and I wasn't looking over their shoulders. I knew what they were doing, okay? The reason that I hired them was because they were experts in their field. I wanted to let them to continue to be experts. And then after they get used to you, after 6 months or so, then you start to develop your leaders within. You develop your teams, or you develop your departments, and you give those people. I never dictated to them. We would sit down and I'd say, okay, here's the objective. Now how are we going to get there? I never solved that. They solved it. I didn't have the answers, good golly. So when you begin to develop that kind of a culture, people are willing to do almost anything. So I think, that's what I've always tried to do. My strength is not me. My strength is using those people around me and not using them, but utilizing their talents and skills.
Incentivizing them, because if they feel like, it's amazing what people will do if they feel like they have skin in the game.
And they're valued.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So, well, I want you to pour that out of education. You talked about education, you talked about organizations, we talked about culture. How does that play out in our communities right now, especially when we have social issues? We talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. You talk about coming to this region and segregation, how far we've come, but yet how far we still have to go.
Yes.
How does that play out in our community as far as impacting culture?
Now we've gone much broader, obviously, and we have, in this case, the example that you're giving me, we have elected leaders, and then we have business leaders, and we have educational leaders. I think there's got to be a real strong commitment for, number one, what is it that we want to do in Washington County, whatever, and people have to be able to say what that is, okay? Are we going to become an inclusive environment, or whatever the case it is? And every person, whatever that theme is, a national program, a class, whatever that is, should be on a little card that everybody carries every day. And they look at it and they say, what is our mission? I should be able to go ahead and go in any classroom and say to a teacher, what are we doing today? What's our mission? Well, we're growing children to be leaders in our community, whatever it is. And we have to get behind that. But if we go scattered and we don't get the major players together, I mean the big players, as well as utilizing committees and that type of thing, Hagerstown has changed drastically, but we're certainly not any place where we need to be. So we need to somehow or another get those individuals together and really work on this thing. And I'm not talking once a month. I mean, we've got to grind.
Right.
And our business leaders, their jobs are very different. As leaders, you've got underlings under you who can carry on. As a principal, I've got assistant principals who can take over for the day or whatever, and we need to get Leadership Hagerstown. I was in Leadership Hagerstown, I think class 11, and it was such a wonderful experience. I was a principal at South Hagerstown High at the time, and it took a day a month for 12 months. They're probably still doing the same things.
Class 32.
You got it. 32, good golly.
Class 7.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Jim was before me.
So I'm the odd man out here.
Yeah,
I'm not,
they need to get you in
one
there.
day, one of these days.
You were
Still-
in Leadership Maryland, so you just kind of skipped
I
a
skipped
step.
it,
You
but,
skipped it.
but they won't grandfather me in. They said I have to be,
You got to do your year.
I have to do my time. So,
Absolutely, I would agree with that.
So one of these days.
I think it's in the bylaws.
Is it still the Xerox Center?
No, they moved
No.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Several times.
We're actually virtual completely right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did that help?
It definitely did help. For me, when I talk leadership, I always relate it to sports. That's the easiest way for me to explain it, experience it, share it with my children. Like mine is through sports. Like that's the easiest way that I can do it. But now that you're talking about, our business leaders, our political officials, our nonprofit leaders, part of getting these groups together is there's normally a competition. It's like, who's going to be the leader of these meetings, right? It's never becomes this cohesive group that's working towards one thing, because one group wants this to be the mission and the other group wants this to be the mission.
There's nothing worse than getting leaders together.
Right? And then what's my title going to be as a part of this committee or this leadership? So there's always these competing interests.
Sure, and I think the way to handle that is that you have to certainly state whatever your objectives are going to be, that there are boundaries, there are rules. Okay, so if I've got a community leader who we know, is very strong and that type of thing, maybe it's better if he sends one of his underlings in, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
So I think that you have to have people who are committed to the cause, okay, and not just showing up, and I think great things can happen, but you've got to. We tend to, when we do that, we're not developing our leaders for the future. We've got
Right.
our leaders for now, and we should always be developing a legacy, not my legacy, but a legacy for the community so that they can move forward. Every time there's a political change, there's another point of view, right?
Right.
But what is it we can agree on and try to move towards? That would be it.
One of the things you said is that you still go to sporting events
yeah.
and you love, enjoy that. When you go to a sporting event and observe and you're looking at coaching, how fast can you identify leaders, like really good leaders? And what type of things do you see that lead you to that these are great leaders?
I think too many times coaches are in the last play and not moving towards the present, which they should be in, and then moving towards the next play. So we're worried about that call. I can't do a thing about that. So I take all my energy and I complain and I get my anxiety and I'm mad at somebody now rather than coaching my kids. And so I always looked for, I tried to not be vociferous. Of course, if a kid's competing in track and field, you don't have that battle between the official, et cetera. You're observing. But I think that too many people are focusing on the past and not where we need to be and where we are. And so that's a problem for me. And the best coaches that I've seen were ones who were pensive, in other words, thinking, not saying a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And when they did, they never embarrassed a student, or they never embarrassed an athlete. They would sit them down. If the youngster was a little hot, send them down to the end of the bench. That's where you're going first, and then you're coming back up to me, after 30 seconds. That's all part of what you lay out for that team. When this happens, this happens. Too many times you'll see the coaches arguing with the kid, and he's worried about the last play. I don't care. This is what you've got to do the next time. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that relatively quiet interaction between the coach who is coaching and is sharing what you need to do the next time, or reminding the athlete of what's appropriate.
I remember growing up, my mother said, "Do as I say, not as I do." And you can say that, but that's not how kids learn.
Nope.
That's not how people learn, right? They learn by watching. They repeat. They replicate actions. They mirror actions. And when some of those same things you called out in coaches, we see in players and politicians and every other leadership position today, where it's about not having that integrity of your actions, but wanting people to follow what you tell them to do. And you see about players, first time a call happens, instead of getting back down the court, you're sitting there worried, you're complaining, and then someone else scored. Now you piled on to the issue because you're trying to address something that you don't have the ability to change. Right. And what's the saying? Lord, give me the power to change what I can and move through what I can't, and understanding to know the difference, right? Yeah. So how does that play out right now as we see the expansion into leadership, right? Of not just what you say as you lead, but what you do when you're not when you're not coaching, but when you're home. And especially with social media turning a camera on the life of leaders 24/7 and kids having that access to it.
I think the first thing a leader does is we talked about listening, okay?
Yes.
We talked about then acting, but has to present the model that they want. You just said it. And so as a principal, as a school principal, it was important for them to know who I was personally, to know that I was their principal or their godfather, so to speak, as the state says in loco parentis. But I wanted to see that I cared. I wasn't in my office. I would get there an hour and a half before school started. I would meet with my team a half an hour before school. That would be my administrative team. And then every single day of my educational career where I was in a school, I was at that bus stop out front, in front of the flagpole, oftentimes on a little camp chair. and saying hi to the kids as they came in every single day, waving to parents as they dropped their kids off. It was important for me to know that they knew that their principal was taking their children into his hands and they would be safe. And so I did that. My assistants would do the cafeteria when the kids were waiting and that kind of thing, but I was at there. Rain, shine, didn't matter for me. And I think people wanted to see, and they saw, what it was I was putting into action, what my thoughts and what my words were. And I think that's so important. People who don't understand that, and I think many people don't these days, they think that I'm going to be a leader, and so that's it, and I'm the leader, and so there you go. Okay, and it's not going to be beneficial for our society at all. Yeah.
You know, we whether we're talking about sports, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about business, politics, the fact of the matter is that it's easy when everything's going your way, but never does it always go your way.
Right.
Talk to me about resiliency. Talk to me about how recovery from those bad situations, those bad circumstances, those bad decisions, quite frankly. How do you lead through that?
You learn leadership through experience, more often failure than success.
Yes.
And that's one thing that the Marine Corps teaches you. You never do anything right, okay, in the eyes of either the sergeant instructor or your instructor officers. They will always find something wrong with what you're doing. So your mindset going through those training is that it's always going to be uncomfortable, always. And we are in such a comfort zone in this country these days that I'm very concerned going into the future. But nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but many people don't realize what a great gift that we have. And so they are very comfortable with that. And if things aren't making me happy every single day, there's something wrong with me. There's death, there'll be fires, there'll be accidents, all kinds of things. The true measure is what's going to happen when it goes bad. I think resilience is the ability to take a look at the situation, make an evaluation of it, set goals, and then move forward into action. And that's what resilience is, to take the bad times, maneuver them, learn something from them, and then move forward.
Excellent.
But one of the things I keep hearing from you as a theme is that it is very important to write your goals down,
Yes.
right?
Every single day.
It has to be visualized, whether it's yourself personally, whether it's the team, whether it's your family. The goals have to be written and have to be written plain and clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stick them on the refrigerator.
Yeah. So, two questions. First one is, when are we going to be able to purchase your book on leadership?
What a question. My wife tells me to do it every single day.
was
I've been
hoping for
trying to do it. I've been trying to do it for years.
I'll be your first Amazon order.
What I need is a good editor is what I need. So if anybody knows anybody out there that's willing to go ahead and sit with me for hours, I'll be happy to pay you.
You might want to look into the camera because I'm sure there's a really good editor that's watching right now.
It's an AI editor out there. Honestly, right now, I think you've dropped enough jewels on here right now to write a book just through AI. So I think it won't be hard.
Well, I've always thought about that. I just haven't done it. And,
Well,
it's one of
I
those-
think, I think the thing is that we're losing wisdom in our communities because the time and the circumstances of what you grew up in and your transition from north to here and being in the panhandle of West Virginia, like those experiences are being lost, and I believe your voice is really important. The second question is, when we watch sports, we always hear about the coaching tree, right? Bill Belichick's coaching tree. He had these coaches, and Mike Krzyzewski, his coaching tree. What's your coaching tree like? I mean, in all of your years, who have you inspired to follow in your footsteps? Whether it's coaching, whether it's teaching, whether it's athletic director. I mean, business. Like, yeah, what's your coaching tree like?
Well, I still have a coaching tree, and I continue to mentor several assistant principals. I think I've had, my big thing was with an assistant principal with me, if they did a good job and they wanted to be a principal, we could get them there. And I think I've had 21 assistants who are now or were principals.
Wow.
At some level. And that's my legacy, okay? That they were willing to listen, they were willing to learn. Oftentimes they would think I was crazy, and that's exactly what I wanted them to think, you know. But I continue to do several people right here in the county, and they've all been very successful. I interact with them on a regular basis. I have a phone tree of people that I connect with. And as I get older, of course, as Jim and I had been speaking earlier about one of his classmates, we're not all going to be here, for very long. So I try to keep those, at least a communication. I may not see them, but there have been many. And there have been multiple people who've gone on to coaching track and field and done a very good job.
We're coming down to the last few minutes of our time here together. I need to ask you this. What inspires Bo? How do you find your energy to do the things that you do every day? And you clearly, you do them every day. You are focused.
One thing I learned, and that is, as soon as you wake up, make your bed. Once you've made your bed, you've achieved an objective for the day. And if that's all I did something well, usually. I just, I tell people I'm so happy to be alive. I have been gifted with a wonderful life, lots of challenges, but I just think that we need to utilize the time we have, and if we make connections, it can be a fruitful life, and it certainly has been for me.
Reg, Terrence, last question.
I'm a bed maker myself. I believe in that. If I accomplish anything, I get out of bed and I make the bed, and I appreciate being able to get out of it every morning as well.
Okay. I'm committing to my wife that I'm going to get better at making the bed in the morning. I'm going to get better at that. One more sports question before we let you go. Give me just a few names of the best athletes you've ever seen in this tri-state area.
Any sport.
Any sport.
Rodney Monroe, Jeff Scuffins.
Jeff was a runner.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, national champion 2 times. Terry Baker is a wonderful athlete. I think of Mike Brashears, who was a star in college as well as high school. Mm-hmm. Greg Slick as a great coach. Mm-hmm. There are just so many. There's so many. And we've been very fortunate with that here in Washington County. I hope we can continue with it.
Absolutely.
Well, my takeaway for the night, and this is no surprise, is that number one, you should write a book. And number two, forget about the past. Focus on what's next. We have serious problems to solve in this country, in this community, and we don't have time for the cosmetic ones. We need to move on.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you'll
for me.
come back and see us. You were a great start for our new segment.
Excellent.
And so you've set the bar
Tough
very
act to
high.
follow. Tough act to follow.
You set the bar. That's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you will follow us on X. We hope you will send us your comments and suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. Most importantly, join us again next week for another visit to the Flip Side. Good night.